Well, good evening, everyone. It is 4 p.m. on May 13th, and this is the monthly meeting of the Fitchburg Transportation and Transit Commission at a special time. And we have no members of the public with us. Let the record show that, let's see. We are missing one member.
We're missing Bill Horns and Dave Willard.
Okay, so we have
Wilborn. I do that every time.
So we have two vacancies. Okay.
Yes, correct.
So let the record show that the remainder of the commissioners are present, and we'll move on to approval of the agenda.
I move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the agenda as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we will use this agenda. Next item will be approval of the minutes from the last meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve minutes.
Second.
You're good. Any discussion on those?
I noticed they spelled Gerhardt wrong in one of the items.
Okay. If you
I
can
think
identify which ones they
7A. They forgot the R.
Okay. We'll take that as a friendly. Any other discussion? So as amended with that typo, all in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Dina, for the minutes. Your staff report, Ross.
All right. So just starting off with some of the construction type projects, I'll move through these pretty quick. Fitchburg Road, we sent back our 90% plan comments to AECom, the designer of that project, so they're working on those. And we will have the 100% plans soon and start the property acquisition. For the 2024 street projects, the resurfacing, we started May 6th, and we are hopefully going to start paving tomorrow on Grandview and Vroman, and then Seminole Highway pretty quickly after that. That's weather dependent. It rained a little bit today, so we're gonna have to kind of check our base material there. Any questions on 2024 streets?
Oh, I do have one. Is the map available on the website?
It is. The plans are on the website.
2024 streets, you were referring to basically the 2024 streets resurfacing project, right?
Correct,
Because
yes.
there are other
Yes, we also have,
siding and stuff like that.
yes, correct.
Crack and chip sealing.
Yep, we also have street maintenance, and then the other annual project we do in-house is the sidewalk replacement. But we haven't started work on either of those yet.
I did have a question on the crack filling and sealing and the chip sealing.
Mm-hmm.
On average, how much does that extend the life of the road if you start that like soon after the road was resurfaced and you get it from early stages?
10 to 15 years if you do basically every 3 years chip sealing or crack sealing, and then every 5 to 8 years chip sealing. It can add, basically take your road from a 20-year life to maybe a 35-year, or at least push it in that direction.
Interesting. Haven't we been budgeting for like 35-year lifespan based on the amount of, okay, so now we're actually
Yes.
gonna make that a reality.
Yes. I mean, the city's always done crack sealing and chip sealing. We just
Okay.
didn't do it last year.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'm still new here.
and we're also doing a lot more crack sealing and chip sealing this year.
I got the impression that there was like
Yeah,
a
in the
renewed
past.
effort to
Yes.
crack down on it.
Yes.
I recall prior to your tenure that there was typically so cracks don't appear for a few years due to shrinkage. So there was maybe in the 3 to 5 year range, there was one chip seal, and then after that, when cracks appeared, there would be one cycle of crack filling. And I didn't know there were more, and I don't know that there were more. But you're saying that we would be more likely to do that, or your intention is that we do that now?
Yes, yeah. Basically, after 2 or 3 years, you get transverse cracks every 40-ish feet. Basically, if you seal those at that point, it costs very, very little money because there's not very many cracks in the road, but you're still preventing water from getting down into the base. And then if you keep up on that cycle, basically every 3 to 5 years after that, those 40-foot blocks crack in half again, and then again, so you get 20 and then 10, and you just keep trying to seal up those, and that prevents you from getting the alligator cracking and stuff like that, where you kind of can't put enough crack seal on the road to seal all the cracks. And eventually it still gets to that point, but you prolong the process. So.
Andy Potts got me hooked on an application that has me biking on all the streets of Fitchburg. So if you need any updates on pavement condition, I'm really up on that.
Well, you know, the Bike the Berg Challenge, they want you to do 150 miles, so there you go.
I have 143 miles of streets, so do one of them twice and you'll be all right.
He's got to start from his house, probably. Every
Yeah,
time.
I'm up to 40%.
Okay.
Okay, so other parts of your report?
Yeah, Sain Phase 1, we finalized the signals, so those are now under our control through the City of Madison. Sain Phase 2 and 3 is kind of in the same spot as Fitzgerald Road, where our engineer is finalizing the plans and specs based on our comments. Osmondson Road, we had, that's for the traffic calming committee for Osmondson Road. We had the 3rd meeting on May 6th, that was last Monday. Based on the outcome of that meeting, I'm going to be sending a survey out to the whole neighborhood, all of Osmondson Road, to get the neighborhood's input on various traffic calming projects. Basically stuff like, what do you think about speed humps in general? What do you think about narrowing the roadway in general? Nothing really specific, but the committee just wants a little bit more information on what the neighborhood wants out of this project.
So are you you're not talking about general narrowing, you're talking about neck downs?
Both.
Okay, so that would be separate. What, are there any other interventions under consideration or under review by the neighborhood?
Yeah, at certain intersections, we've talked about traffic circles, and then also stuff like painting a bike path on the existing pavement along the entire length, or painting, a bike.
So visual narrowing in that
Yes,
case.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's going out to the committee before I send it out to the neighborhood, so I'm sure they'll have comments and want stuff taken out or added in, so.
Would anybody here like to see that draft as well, just FYI?
I guess when the survey goes out. Are you talking about before the survey goes
The
out?
draft.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the draft will be close to the final.
Yeah, I can send out the draft too.
I think that would be informative.
Then I attended another Beltline Planning and Environment Linkages meeting on April 30th. That was really just broad feedback on, they basically broke up their various packages of projects into different combinations and asked for feedback on those. So there wasn't really much besides just voting on each of these packages from the technical advisory committee, so. And then,
Is everybody aware of the kinds of things that are in the PEL proposal? Additional crossings and so on, okay.
yeah, this body gave comments on, I believe, the last meeting of that. So the next one, I'm actually gonna share my screen so I can show you guys something that we're working on and excited about. But this is a draft of our roadway solution, our roadway management center. So this is basically going to be a public-facing map that has a lot more information about our road network. So stuff like lane width, which I don't think is in here yet. It's not in here yet.
This will really make the next bicycle-friendly community application easy.
Yes, I believe our bike lanes are in here, yep. So it's basically just a much better version of the maps that we currently have on our website. It's much easier to navigate. And we have all of our traffic calming devices.
Oh, wow.
Back when I was in City Hall, as elected, there was a big spreadsheet that had all the maintenance history of all the segments. That's been incorporated into this.
It will be, yes. It's not, it's not in here
It's a
yet.
big job.
Yeah, it is.
How big a job is it gonna be to maintain this, keep it up to date, fresh?
It won't be as hard as it is to build it in the first place, but it will take probably biannual maintenance. One of the things we're going to try to build into our construction projects is updating this GIS system and all of our other GIS maps that we'll maintain. And then, so this one, Steve, you were mentioning pavement ratings. This is basically Pacer. This is a 1 to 5 scale, but
Okay.
Pacer is 1 to 10, right?
correct, yeah. So, but basically the same thing. So, and this is,
Incredible.
yeah, this is easy, it's easy to filter, so I could just click this and see, oh, these are all of our roads that are a Pacer rating of 1 to 2 and need to be redone. And conveniently, we're
Doing them.
getting to almost all of these this year,
Yay.
so.
So in answer to Bill's question, it'll be way easier to update the GIS information in this resource than it will be to do the rest of the project. So.
Yes, correct.
So the GIS specialist should be able to keep up with, Payne and Dolan and the rest of the gang to do the work.
Exactly.
When you're looking to go live for the public?
Probably late summer, early fall. There's a lot of QA, QC that we have to do even after it gets all the way put together, so. Yeah, so
We're
that's,
excited about that. That
Yeah.
is a big deal.
yeah, and then it'll make a lot of my day-to-day tasks a lot easier too, so. Yeah, so that's my report. Any questions?
And we'll invite much more backseat engineering. But it'll be a big resource.
A canned email though that says please refer to, or.
Right.
Yes.
All right, any other questions for staff? All right, let's move on to council items, and up for consideration first is amending the composition of our very own commission. So I'll entertain a motion to approve, and then we'll get a staff report.
Approval of ordinance 2024-0-11.
Second.
Thank you. So what are we doing here, Ross?
All right, so Transportation Transit, as you all know, currently has one member appointed by the Board of Public Works. The mayor is proposing replacing that Board of Public Works representative with a representative from the Bike and Pedestrian Commission. And basically this ordinance reflects everything that would need to be changed in every ordinance.
All three.
To make that happen. And then, I don't know if our de facto Board of Public Works representative wants to talk about what the amendment that was made there.
Yes, so this proposed ordinance change was amended in the Board of Public Works meeting to say, no, we're not gonna put a member of the Bike and Ped Commission on here, we're gonna put another at-large citizen on this commission. And there were several reasons given. One, it was felt that, much like Bill Horns said, that we're too focused on bicycle and pedestrian issues. But two, there was just a general feeling that the more voices we hear from, the better off we are. And so if we're recycling by appointing people from one commission to another, then we're hearing the same voices multiple times.
So that's two reasons.
Yes.
Did they talk about how, because historically, I have almost never seen the BPW rep at these meetings, like maybe twice in my 4 years on this commission. So I just like, it's like an ongoing issue where we cannot get the person that was appointed.
Fortunately, we did not propose that.
They're fine not having a public works representative.
Oh, they just don't
They just,
want
yeah,
it to be a bike and ped
yes.
representative.
And so.
Oh, okay, sorry,
yeah,
I misunderstood.
Right, and one of the questions was, well, who decided we should put somebody from the Bike and Ped Commission on here? And I said, well, we talked about it in TTC as well as, we had somebody from another board/commission on here, so we figured we might as well continue that tradition. I don't know if that was, maybe there's a requirement, maybe there's not.
Yeah.
At any rate, so, those are the options, I guess. We can.
I guess my thought on adding someone from Bike and Ped is just more of a collaboration, like, so we're not doing the same thing without communicating with each other. I guess that's what I was thinking the purpose of it was. But if that's not like going to be an issue, I don't.
I agree, and I know we're very bike heavy now, but that's not like for sure. And so 5 years from now, we could have no connection if there's not somebody there, so. And we're not losing a member of the public. I like their second point, but it doesn't seem totally relevant because we're not losing an additional member since we already had a duplication.
No,
We just
but
never saw that.
we would be bringing new voices to the table.
Right.
Is the thought.
Well, I do think that right now it's not in the ordinance, it's more of the mayor's responsibility to try to make sure that this commission has balanced viewpoints from all users of the transportation network. I would, if the council, speaking of two alders here, if the council thinks that the idea that another appointed citizen by the mayor would be a better solution, I would not object. I think that it fits into what this commission was expressing, or the majority, when you all said that there should be that bicycle and pedestrian should be a committee and report to us. So in that sense, I think that the original version of this ordinance is the one that my feeling is that our sentiment would be the best solution. We didn't really specify when we moved approval, so I'll go back to Bill, who made the motion. Were you moving the original version or the Board of Public Works version?
I guess.
Well, you can decide now if.
Yeah, I was moving the original version and informing you what the Board of Public Works did.
Okay.
So if we feel compelled, we can also move that same amendment.
So I'm open to any amendments to this. And I don't think that you need to specify the precise nature of the amendment because there's lots of little atomic changes in the ordinance to implement this. But we can give the recommendation of the council of what we want. So is there sentiment to, does anybody think that we should adopt the Public Works amendment? If so, make that motion.
I'll move that we make the same amendment as Public Works for the sake of discussing it.
Okay, is there a second for the sake of discussing it?
I mean, sure, I can second.
Okay, all right. So we have the Public Works amendment on, and we're going to have a roll call vote in a little bit to decide what it is we want to do. But why don't we just go around the table, starting with Alder Gerhardt to each voice our opinions on the matter.
I like the original proposal. I think it matches what we've discussed, and I think, I take the point of BPW, like I understand what they're saying and I understand where they're coming from, but like I said to Bill Horns last week, like I think there is no such thing as too much focus on bike and pedestrians because our transit system is default caters to people in cars. So an additional voice talking about bike and pedestrian, it's not like suddenly the whole city is going to become a bike-only city.
Yeah.
Like we're a car city, but we can make improvements to make bikes and pedestrians safer. And so I think the coordination between the committees is really the key. Is right now there's no direct communication, and I think having that back and forth is good. And I also think, just as a separate note, perhaps we should consider adding a report from Plan Commission and Bike and Ped Commission to the agenda so that we can kind of improve like the communication back and forth between the committees and bring those items from the other commission's discussions to here.
That's a good point.
idea.
Yeah, we've got a built-in report from Public Works because our staff contact every meeting. So having the same from any other visiting commissioners.
Ross, will you bring us back to that when we get to future agenda items? Since
Yes.
it's not on the agenda for today, but I think it would be very worthwhile to make a motion that we change the agenda to do that if every time. Okay, Bill, your thoughts on this amendment that you made?
When you say you, it wasn't directly from, I was not the originator of this idea, but I think, the reason that, the major reason given for this was initially, won't anyone think of the car drivers? But, the secondary reason was, hey, let's bring more voices to the table, and I found that particular argument compelling. And I guess that can work out well, or it could work out poorly, depending on who applies, who eventually gets appointed. If there's somebody on the Bike and Ped Commission, that's one person we've got to vet and find, right? And if we've got to double that work, well, there's a little bit of a wild card there. On the other hand, there's nothing that says we can't invite people informally from another committee or commission, whether that is a realistic possibility. I kind of think it's not. Nobody wants to go to an extra city meeting, right? I can go either way on this. I like the idea of having another fresh voice. I like the idea of having somebody from the Bike and Ped Commission here. And I agree with Alder Gerhardt's sentiments. By default, show me a neighborhood in the city where the average resident can reasonably live car-free. Such a thing exists? I don't think so. And,
There's a lot of people doing it in our healthy neighborhoods, areas, but.
okay.
It's tough.
Let me amend that. Show me a neighborhood where people choose to do that because it's more convenient to get around without a car than with a car. And until that's the case, I think, we've got plenty of cars are well represented in the city.
Elizabeth?
I agree. I mean, to that point, I think all of us, even if we ride bikes or take transit, we also drive sometimes or ride in a car sometimes. So I don't think it's fair to say we're not representing drivers as well, because I think a lot of us do that or ride in a car. And I think consistency is just really important in coordinating among the two. So that's why I think we should definitely have overlap.
I think if we're gonna do Vision Zero as a focus on this group, we need someone from bike and pedestrian. I think if that's like going to be a large focus, that like the crossover between the two groups is such that we need to have someone in that group here.
Very good. My thoughts are that, well, first, a point of information. You may have observed this, you're on RCC. There are commissions, and I certainly remember this from my 8 years on RCC, that they actively go out and recruit their future members. When one of them goes off, they all are all in, finding another person, and that's a very busy committee in terms of the work that they do outside of their monthly meetings. We could do that too. And if that was of interest, then we would vote for the Public Works version of this ordinance. But it sounds like a lot of work to go out and recruit people. We can leave it to the mayor. So I think I'm going to go with the original version. Is there?
I just hope that we can, it's not hard to get a bike and ped person to come.
If it is, then we can revisit it.
All we've got to do is say the meeting time is not 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Is that what bike and ped is?
7:30 in the morning, yep.
I'm glad it's not going to.
I was just gonna say, going in that direction.
I mean, historically, I think planning commission's been well represented, but it'd be good to, hopefully it won't be an issue for bike and ped.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. This is on the amendment to add the Public Works style amendment to delete the idea of a cross-commission representative and instead just have an alder and 6 citizens. All roll call. We'll go around in the same order, Gabrielle.
Nay.
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 No. All right, that dispenses with that. Is there any more discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, all in favor of recommending approval as drafted in the original packet, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Let the record show it was unanimous. Next up is the locally preferred alternative approval for the bus rapid transit. We'll get a motion to recommend approval up on the docket.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Staff report?
I think we had the draft LPA at this body at our last meeting, but just as a reminder, the locally preferred alternative, it's a required step in the Small Starts grant, and it basically lets this project move forward into the environmental assessment and then into the design phase. Basically, it's locking down certain aspects of the project so that we can move forward with the design and not have to go back and second guess decisions that have already been made.
And those are the route and the station locations.
Correct.
But not center running, side running, bicycle accommodations, intersection redesigns, etc.
Correct. So there's a report in the packet and a route map. Those are the 2 things that you're voting on approval for this item.
And is this, so tell me about the expansion of 65 and 75. Is that part of what we're approving, or is that a separate item still?
That's technically a separate item,
Okay.
but it is kind of tangentially included as a.
It's a mitigation for not
Yes.
extending BRT to the Civic Center.
Right.
Right.
So when you say, all right, I'm happy with ending at Brendan, that's because there's been this implicit promise that we have to work out the details later
Right.
about which will be extended and where the money's coming from and things like that.
But those extensions are not.
But the feds don't care about that. Yeah, I found the packet daunting. I admit I did not read the report. I would like a staff assessment of is the report faithfully represented in the presentation that we saw and that was also included in the packet?
Yes. The report and the presentation are, a lot of it's word for word, and a lot of the additional information that both Mike and Liz from Metro provided in their, when they were talking about the presentation, is from the report.
And I think the report has a lot of statements of like, the further detailed design of this is out of scope for the preferred locally alternative, and so that's repeated a lot through there.
Correct.
Anything else that we should be super aware of that's in the report that we might not otherwise know about?
No, everything was in the last presentation. The only other things are, we had a couple of public information meetings since that draft LPA presentation. At the Fitchburg meeting, we got a lot of comments on Park Street, and then a few comments on bike infrastructure in Fitchburg that is related to the LPA. So, yeah, that's.
Okay, further discussion, Bill?
Yeah, so there was Alder Gerhard and I attended the Commission on Aging Well meeting, and one of the commissioners, when we said that BRT is not going to be extended down to the civic campus, I pointed out the lack of density on Fish Hatchery Road between McKee and Lacey, and his point was, well, it's not necessarily about the density along the way so much as how many people are interested in the destination at the end of the line there. And I don't know that I had heard that particular point brought up and discussed at any of the meetings thus far. Do we have any sort of traffic data that can tell us how many people are coming to the civic campus every day from north of McKee Road? Or
no.
Yeah, okay.
The only relevant data I can think of is ridership on the 65, but that's peak hour only route right now, and it does not come in it doesn't come down Fish Hatchery Road, it comes down East Sherrill to get to Civic Campus.
Okay.
So it's really not a good comparison.
I looked up the Wisconsin DOT has their average daily traffic counts for a lot of roads, and I was like, okay, well, how many people? There's 10,000 coming, and after Lacey Road, there's only 8,000. So what about Lacey Road? Can I tell? And I'm not sure I could really tell much of anything from just those numbers. You don't know which direction they're going or anything, but.
We did talk about this and all the people who work in what I'm told is called Fitchburg Center or whatever over there. And I think Liz said they don't measure that, like they measure based on who could get to the line from where they live. Specifically the grant program. I don't know if you know more about that.
Okay,
and that
right.
was why they were specifically looking at number of people who live within like the corridor rather than where they were going. Because it's also a big job area there that would be good to have people over here for.
That's an interesting point, though. I mean, if there was something of the scale of Sub-Zero Wolf, where they've got 3 shifts of workers that come in and out of there every day. What if that were in some remote location not near any housing? You might have a huge demand for transit to that place, but if nobody lives around it, then
I'm with
They're
you.
just looking at the different metrics.
And that is a good point, that part of this decision is based on what the FTA looks at as criteria for the grant.
Right.
And because there's less density and less people live close to the line, that would, extending the route down to Civic Campus would hurt the scoring of the grant application.
One of the things that people argue for high-quality transit, be it commuter or light rail or BRT, is that it fosters economic development. And in particular, investment in the built environment. And each of those things is easier to move, from commuter rail to light rail to BRT to buses. And so each of them has a progressively lower ability to attract dense transit-oriented development. But transit-oriented development and causing it is one of the goals of BRT, and it's one of the areas where the Fitchburg Center scores highly because of vacant developable land. Unfortunately, it's not something that the FTA considers, and so even though it's important to us, it's not important to them and the grant process. I did have to come up with for the bicycle-friendly business application for this civic campus. We went out to the administration to speak to each of the departments who are on the civic campus, particularly City Hall, Police, Library, Senior, and Community Centers, to estimate the number of weekly or average daily guests, and that's 1,200. So that is really a huge number of people that are coming here. Now, if they're coming here from our rural neighborhoods, then obviously they're not going to be helped. But by and large, most of them are coming from the north and the west and the northeast. So that's a statistic. And it's an estimate, you know, nobody counted these people, but it's a data point. All right, any other discussion?
Yeah, I have some ancillary pieces. I support this and I'm gonna vote yes, but another thing that came up with Commission on Aging while that was interesting was that he was talking about, someone was asking about extending increasing the frequency of the 75. When you're going down Fish Hatchery and then westbound on McKee, people that are dropped off at that current stop would have to cross McKee Road at a non-lighted intersection to get to, because it drops off around Triverton Pike, I think. And so crossing to the station that exists on the other side of McKee Road is a real challenge. And I think for like a really mobile person, probably not that big of a deal, although the intersection, the lighting intersection for pedestrians on Fish Hatchery is a real pain. So even going up to Fish Hatchery is challenging, but for someone that has mobility issues, like that's like real challenging.
That's
So
true.
I don't know how we manage that, and it's not something we have to answer today. It's just something that I think we should keep in mind as we continue talking about how we expand transit in conjunction with the BRT.
That's something we could, that is in the scope to look at with the 65 and 75 expansions. I'm just kind of spitballing if the 75 just came down to Brendan and then did the same
Yeah.
little jog that the BRT is going to do.
Anybody who wanted to catch the bus who lived north of McKee would have to still cross at Fish Hatchery Road.
Well, they could cross the Chapel Valley too.
Yes.
Depends on where they're coming from. If they live on Yarmouth Greenway,
Yeah.
then they, so
It's
let's
just
make a
something
note
that's
for future agenda item to talk about pedestrian access across the east end of McKee Road.
It makes perfect sense to put the station there. Like, I think it's a good spot for the station, especially for charging.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a good spot for it, but there's definitely pieces that I think have to be figured out with
We've
the
already-
current structure.
I mean, like turning left out of there on a car is
It's hard.
much less trying to.
For a bus.
And like, yeah, and the cars come flying around Fish Hatchery.
Yes,
Honestly,
and there is
like trying to walk across that would be.
So maybe that, I mean, maybe the solution is maybe we don't increase the frequency of the 75, maybe there's a different route that runs more frequently, that maybe does it slightly different, and then maybe it goes all the way down to Hatchery Hill. Because to my knowledge, right now, we don't pay for the 75 at all.
Correct.
So,
But we would, if we ran all day.
yes, so,
Yes, we would pay for that, the difference in service.
so maybe that's the wrong route, if we're gonna pay for it, maybe that's not the right route.
Well, yeah, I really like the idea of having the expanded service that provides an east-west connection through the city that hasn't been here, I mean, for all-day service. I'm not sure exactly what, I'm not quite following what you're suggesting for changes for the
Like
75.
adding a line, instead of increasing the frequency of the 75, we add a east-west line. It might be the same cost anyway, because we're not paying for the 75 now anyway, but.
Well, if we added the line, we'd pay for all of it, and if we enhanced the 75, we'd only pay the delta. So it would cost more. But this is out of scope.
Yes.
And I would much rather light the intersection, signalize that intersection, and put some walk signals in, and get rid of the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit sign that's right by Walgreens that faces eastbound traffic.
Holy cow, seriously?
Yeah, check it out.
It's like, you gotta start tapping your brake before you see that sign.
Yeah, so, let's put that in the parking lot, figuratively, and, go back to the, LPA, acronym that does not roll off my tongue yet. Any other discussions on that?
No, my only problems with it are not the Fitchburg area, so.
Okay.
My mouth shut.
In the north? Or what?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to comment on that? Because we could weigh in too.
No, I just think, I understand why it's not going to the airport,
Oh,
but I think using current ridership to the airport as a reason to not send it to the airport
crazy,
is
yes.
ridiculous. And the,
We're not gonna build a bridge, not enough people swimming across the river.
right,
well, I think that would be a completely reasonable thing for us to say that we think more discussion, we want to go to the airport, and we need more discussion for transit to the airport. But, you know, we got to have that before we, I mean, it might be like the connection to the civic campus is
Exactly.
that.
Nobody lives.
Not enough
Got it.
residents.
Would you be open to that as a recommendation to the council and then to Metro that we need better service to the airport and we're approving this conditional on that?
I mean, I don't know if I want to approve it conditionally, but we could, if you can put a note or something. I just like, yeah, I would love to take transit to the airport.
Ross, your
Like,
thoughts?
But I have heard the argument of why they didn't do the airport route multiple times, and I understand it. Like, it makes sense to me. I get why they want to do loop, and I get the timing issues that it creates if they do both and split and everything. I totally understand it all. You're building a massive transit route in the city of Madison, and you're not sending it to the
You're not connecting to the,
Right.
you're not connecting to the,
and you're
the regional.
and you're making it, and you're like continuing to make everyone drive and park at the airport. It just seems.
I'll throw one more thing out about that issue. I'm a big fan of Transit 2020, the idea of commuter rail or heavy rail using our existing rail lines. And one of the things that causes me to be a big supporter of BRT is that the Transit 2020 rail corridors, of which there are 4, north, south, east, and west, are parallel and far enough apart from the BRT corridors that it is reasonable that that would be a future thing to do. And that would address the airport. And so you could get on at the Uptown Station.
You take the
And take
65.
the commuter rail to the airport. Or to Sun Prairie, or to Middleton. And so that's my fond hope for the future, because, like you said, they're not going to the airport with this BRT.
Yeah, and I understand that.
Anything else? All right, well, we don't, I guess, get to put our spin on it, so a yes or a no. All in favor of recommending approval of the locally preferred alternative, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So let the record show is unanimous. On to our next item. All right. Okay, we're on to discussion items. And the thing that caused me to want to talk about this is we have money in the 2024 budget to hire a grant writer. And we have, I get like, it seems daily emails from various groups like Rails to Trails Conservancy and the Bike League and Healthy Communities and so on about these federal deadlines for safe streets to all, active transportation, forget the rest of that acronym, transportation alternatives programs and so on. Much of this is coming from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. And I'm wondering if we could discuss and whether staff is open to applying for any of these things, or if you are already, I know we have some grants that are in the pipeline, like the underpass. But are there more of these that we should be, and do we have the capacity to put in for more of these? The examples that I give, so these are big grants, like millions and millions of dollars. And so not little piddling $100,000 or $150,000 grants to signalize an intersection, as important as that are, those are, but the ones that I have in mind are our connection to Southdale from the Cap City Trail, which could involve boardwalk over the E-Way, our connection between Post Road and the Capital City Trail that will connect to the future Perry Street overpass over the Beltline and serve northeast Fitchburg. And the most ambitious of these would be the idea of a off-road trail, could be a side path or through the hinterlands to the village of Oregon. And the reason that we don't have it yet is because it's super expensive and requires a lot of grading and maybe wetland crossings to go down along either Route 14 or the railroad or a combination. And it could be feasible for the city to apply for a feasibility study or an engineering grant so we could get some of these projects more towards shovel ready. So that's the genesis of this item. And I would like to ask Ross next to weigh in on where we are, and with that introduction, what you think might be of interest or feasible or what.
Yeah, so I just kind of also wanted to go through some of the grants that we have right now, and are also some of the ones we're working towards, just to kind of show some of the work that staff has done and is doing. So for Fitcherona Road, we have a $2.9 million LRIP grant, which is a local road improvement program. A lot of that funding is for the additional bike lanes and for the other pedestrian improvements, like at the roundabout for that. We also,
That's a state grant?
yes, LRIP is a WISDOT grant.
What's the acronym?
Local Road Improvement Program.
Oh, LRIP. Okay,
Yes.
got it.
And there's several there's about 8 different buckets of money within LRIP. Basically, LRIP is just the state, it's the main program that the state gives municipalities to reconstruct roads as a whole.
You said there was 2.9 million?
Correct. And that's a $6.5 million project total.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very
Nice
large chunk of that, which is very nice. Then Steve, like you mentioned, we have the TAP grant for the County Highway MM underpass. That's a 60% state and 40% local split. So about 400,000 from the state and 300,000 from Fitchburg.
Say that again, what's the number again?
60% from the state, so 400,000, and then 40% from Fitchburg, which is about 300,000. Then we were talking about streetlights before the meeting. We have a carbon reduction program grant to replace our high pressure sodium streetlights with LEDs. That grant is about $90,000. So that's a smaller one, but that replaces about 110 streetlights.
Is that federal or state?
That is a pass-through, so it's federal money that the state is administering. And that does
Is that
cost.
100%?
That is a 80%, 20%. 80% state, 20% local.
Okay, so the 90K is the 80%?
Yes, I believe so.
Just out of curiosity, for a given streetlight, what's the savings in kilowatt hours per year between? Because I thought high pressure sodium was almost as efficient as LEDs.
I don't know that off the top of my head. I could send you that information from the grant application. I do believe our high pressure sodium lights are our least energy efficient type of light.
I don't know why I have that impression in my head, but it's there.
I'll look into that and send that out. We also got a T grant, Transportation Economic Assistance grant for Lacey Road. That's west of Seminole. That basically funded the bike path there. That was for $1 million. That's not a split, they just gave us $1 million. And then we have a Highway Safety Improvement Program grant for South Cyene Phase 3. That's for $1.7 million. That's for the reconstruction of the Cyene and McCoy intersection.
What was the number again for that?
1.7 million.
And that's split?
I don't know the split on that one. I can.
Okay, but the 1.7 is the amount of the grant?
Correct.
Okay.
So those are the grants that we currently have and are working towards on current projects. I do think there's a lot of good opportunities to, especially for the feasibility study type grants like you mentioned, Steve, that would be a very good use for these grant writer hours that we have in the budget.
The Active Transportation Infrastructure Something Act is very discouraging. It was funded, was authorized for 200 million nationwide, but funded for only 45 million. And it consists of construction grants and engineering or planning grants. And among the engineering, the construction grants, they expect them to be about $15 million, and therefore there can only be like 3 of them. The planning grants are or engineering are much less, and there could be a dozen or dozens, but these are nationwide. So this is why all the national advocacy groups like the Bike League and Rails to Trails are knocking themselves out trying to get people to write letters to get this fully funded, to get the money up. They want people to apply so as to demonstrate to Congress the demand for these kinds of projects. Unfortunately, we're not incented to apply because the odds are so steep of getting them. But I am very attracted to this idea of going over the E-way to Post Road, which has bike lanes throughout. And Cyene Road is over wetlands, so it can't really be expanded. But if we were to go with a boardwalk on the east side, we have to go through 2 tax parcels that both belong to Dane County. So we can expect them to be willing to provide that easement. And Dane County, who could do this project, is very experienced at building long bike ped boardwalks, having one of the longest in the country in the Lower Yahara River Trail. So I think that that would really be a great thing to serve our burgeoning development in the northeast Fitchburg, up to this Perry Street and to the North Fish Hatchery. Ross, do you see any opportunities for getting going on such a project with either the available grants or capacity with a grant writer or current staff or even volunteers to work on a project like that? Which do you think is maybe the most favorable project to try to add to?
I think either that boardwalk or or a connection to Southdale, I think would be good uses of the grant writer hours specifically. I think the Southdale connection may open up a couple of other windows for underserved community type grants.
Does everybody know where we're talking about? We'll be on the west side of MM up to Ski Lane, where Ski Lane is a 25 mile an hour with bike lanes, and so it is part of a all ages and abilities network, and then the Cap City Trail would connect to the rest of Fitchburg.
So I think either one of those would be good uses of a professional grant writer's time, and that they could also help guide what programs we would most likely be funded under.
And I know that the Bike Fed has professional expertise that they're willing to lend to communities, to help with these kinds of things. So is Rails to Trails. Can you propose what we should do next to advance such an effort?
I can follow up with Chad Brecklin and basically get more information on how we're splitting or applying for this pool of grant writer hours. I know he was looking for potential projects, so I can put both of those forward as options.
So do that before our next meeting and report back, and we'll put it on as a discussion item. It seemed like a good idea. Does anybody else have any other questions or suggestions or no?
I'm just curious, what do you have in mind? So if the trail is on the west side of Double M, would you then put them up on the north side of McCoy to connect with the existing trail that's on the north side of McCoy, but then, where it crosses just to the west of 14?
I think I would probably just take advantage of the signalized intersection
Okay.
and enhance that.
So anybody they would have to just cross McCoy twice then.
Indeed, but if you don't do that, then you have to cross the exit ramps.
True.
Twice.
Yes.
So you're pretty damned if you do and damned if you don't. But that certainly would be something that could be looked at because we know where to put a path there. That's where Cap City Trail used to go.
I have one question. Speaking as somebody who does fundraising professionally and is now for the first time dealing with government grants, government grants come with a lot of strings attached. And obviously I know we do a lot of transportation grants, which I'm sure a lot of our processes already comply with a lot of the requirements because we're government.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious about what the burden is on the Public Works Department administering these grants, because I think that's an important piece of considering new grants, is if that's a lot of time, and the amount of staff time dedicated to administering the grants can make it so that it's not worth applying.
And is there a difference between state grants and federal grants that we need to worry about as well, or just any grant?
I think federal money is usually more, but you can speak to the specifics for yours.
Yeah, so the federal government generally has more strings attached.
For instance, you can't bring BRT all the way down here because there's not enough residences.
Yeah, they just won't let you do what you want to do. But one example is the streetlight replacement project that I mentioned earlier. That, like I said, that's a pass-through grant where the funding comes from the federal government and the state government is administering it. So one thing we're running into is if we were to do this project without a grant, we would basically just have Mark Hodel and our streets department buy 100 new streetlight fixtures, and he would go out and put them up on
Time available.
when he was available to do it, and we wouldn't have to do any kind of engineering or planning. We already know which of our streetlights are high pressure sodium, and we know the neighborhoods we want to replace them in. But because we have this grant money, we have to do a full plan set, which is about 20 hours of our transportation engineering technician's time. We have to do an environmental checklist that, thankfully, that's fairly simple and should only take me a few hours. And then we also have to buy approved streetlight fixtures that are on their list. And thankfully, luckily, the fixtures that we already use are approved on their list. But if they weren't, we would have to bid out a procurement contract for this and then get 3 bids on the fixtures that we want. And then if we don't get 3 bids, we have to keep bidding until we do. And we basically couldn't move forward with it at that point. So it's just an example just to replace streetlights.
It's kind of like going through molasses.
Yes.
These strings are red in color and sticky on one side.
I do feel like we should point out that many of these strings are to protect people, right? I mean, they're there for a reason. They're annoying, and I'm sorry you have to deal with that, but.
Things like prevailing wage,
Civil rights, Title VI,
National Environmental Protection Act. All right.
It's just something we should keep in mind, because like
Yeah,
staff
we'll
time,
come back with recommendations.
staff time is
related to
valuable,
that.
and it matters, and it can change the calculation significantly.
Yep, it does suggest capacity building in city staff that we already know about, but for example, the idea of having a grant writer to write federal grants, that would be an excellent permanent position, but we need to have the tax base to do it. All right. Any other parting shots on that, or we should move on? Okay, on to Pembroke Drive and Raritan Road, traffic safety and potential crash analysis studio. So I'd like to set this up if I may, and then hear what Ross has to say about this. So I am interested in a group called Strong Towns, and one of the things that they have been doing nationally over the last year, and now they are packaging up as a process, is called a crash analysis studio. There is a strong tendency among municipalities and law enforcement and so on, when a crash occurs. By the way, I will point out that this involves automobiles and not bicycles at this example. But when a crash occurs, there is a lot of work done to nail down exactly who did what wrong. And then the power structures involved are satisfied and they move on with business as usual. And I was strongly influenced by the speech at the Healthy Community Summit, the lunchtime plenary speaker who was the author of this book, There Are No Accidents. And her basic premise is that what we generally call accidents, which are unintentional harm involving people, comes from two things: dangerous conditions and mistakes. And we tend to focus on the mistakes that people make, whether they're distracted driving or whether they made a bad decision in some other way, and never on the existing conditions, are the existing dangerous conditions that, if different, could have changed that. And so what the Crash Analysis Studio does is it tries to kind of studiously avoid blame and looking at what are all the contributing factors environmentally. And we've talked under Vision Zero about safe streets, safe drivers, safe vehicles, post-crash care, and safe speeds. So those are the 5 parts. So I made some notes here about what this involves. You identify a crash, you get the police report, so we've done those 2 things if we decide to move forward with this. Then you do a speed study. You analyze the speed data. You recruit, they recommend 2 local experts, like people who live in the neighborhood or in Alder, and a couple of technical experts to have a panel. And then you have this public crash analysis studio where you go through and suggest possible causes. And it's of the brainstorming nature where, even minor contributing factors would be fair game and, nobody's bad ideas. And then you solicit recommendations to make, in this case it was an intersection, to make the intersection or the street safer. At the studio, you have a final report that's basically summarizes the qualifications of the people, the input you got, all the objective things about the crash. And then once you've got that, then you act in 3 time frames. What can you do immediately to make things better? What kinds of things might take budget and might be done in the next year or 2? And then what are the long-term things? For example, when you reconstruct the street, what could you do? And they recommend 3 different audiences who could get this started. One of them is that if an elected official or an appointed official wants to get a crash analysis studio done for a particular crash or particular area, they could direct staff to do it. Or another way is that if staff during their work and working on the objectives and their work plan that they have from their elected officials thinks that this is important, the staff could initiate it. And if neither of those things are happening in your community, well then some noisy activists can go out and run their own crash analysis studio. And so you perhaps have seen this police report and you've looked at the correspondence indicating that, Pembroke people drive too fast on Pembroke, and there's been near misses there. And so I was thinking that it might be possible to have a crash analysis studio about that crash and to basically bring this process into the city. After serious crashes, you do a crash analysis and you try to improve that situation on the ground, as well as we've learned in our Vision Zero work, similar situations where there hasn't been a crash yet, and we don't want one. So that's the jump ball. Ross first, what do you think of this idea? And, you know, obviously it could be work for staff, and we know that's the biggest constraining factor, but there are other areas, other ways to do this besides having staff do it. Your thoughts?
My initial thought is that based on the speed data and the traffic counts that I've done on Raritan Road since this accident, there are much higher traffic and higher crash frequency intersections or stretches of road in the city that if we're going to devote staff time to doing a crash analysis studio, it might be better spent in other locations.
Okay. What do you think about the idea of a crash analysis studio?
I think it's a great idea in general. I think especially when combined with something like Vision Zero and a high injury network, where you can get both the maybe more brainstorm anecdotal type of feedback from the crash analysis studio and the data driven this is what has worked in other similar intersections, that kind of feedback from a high injury network analysis or Vision Zero plan. So I think having both of those and trying to balance them is very important. It's basically what we try to do in our traffic management process, where we have all the data and then we also bring in the neighborhood. You know, really this could just be, it could be an extension or a expansion of that same idea.
Or another track, maybe?
Sure, yeah.
One of the things I worry about is that I think that I thought it was in one of the emails that says that this intersection would not be eligible for the neighborhood.
Correct, so there.
And I don't want the city to be hamstrung by not being able to approve conditions if they don't go through that process. So.
My one comment would be that it's not eligible for that process because of how little traffic there is on both streets involved in the intersection.
Okay. I should also mention that I happened upon this crash just a few minutes after it happened while biking down to Key Farms Park. So that kind of made a big impression on me, so that's why I'm talking about this crash. Other feedback or thoughts on whether this idea of a crash studio would be germane for Fitchburg or contribute to our other efforts? Or
Would it be helpful if, so this is right by me, my house too, and like I heard about this when it first happened. Is it helpful, like with the amount of effort that goes into that, is it helpful to, I guess, analyze a crash as a kind of first one we're gonna do as a city where, I mean, I don't really know how I should say this, but where it's not as like clear cut what happened. I mean, the guy was looking at his phone and ran a stop sign, right? Like where is it better to not only do like a more high injury network area, but also one where maybe like there isn't a at fault situation, like where you can kind of analyze what went on and really come to like some conclusions. I mean, this one I don't know what to do.
It would be very tempting to say that the driver was being a jerk and therefore.
Yes, that is very, that is the
We should say,
like,
people must not be jerks.
right, and people must not drive without their licenses, and with revoked licenses, and.
So one thing that Jesse Singer, the author of that book, There Are No Accidents, said is, well, and she was relaying somebody else's comments, but we need to design our streets so that they're safe for a drunk, because then they are safe for everyone, you know? I mean, this incident on Pembroke and Raritan, this is a perfect example of, you know, physical infrastructure is the only thing that would have made any difference. This guy didn't have a license, he didn't have a registration, he didn't have insurance.
He wasn't looking where he was going.
You know, looking at his phone, he was exceeding the speed limit, although he didn't get a speeding ticket. Not sure what that was about. But, I mean, he was doing everything right. He was basically just giving society the middle finger and saying, I am more important than everyone. And if you build the environment so that somebody with that attitude and that behavior is unable to cause damage, then, you know, everybody is better for it. It's just a question of how much tax base is there, right?
That's my question, like, where do you best allocate resources
Yeah.
to make the biggest impact?
And I had a question as well on, you know, so the city can do something and that's gonna require public works time, it's gonna require, you know, it requires a lot, right? How does the city feel, how does the traffic engineer feel about tactical urbanism? You know, like if you put 7 tires out in the middle of that intersection, 1 in the center, 6 surrounding, you dump a bunch of gravel in there, put some reflective tape on, for $500, you've got a traffic circle.
So I think this is a very small step away from doing temporary traffic calming that could even be reused in other places. If we put up, they make plastic traffic circles or rubber traffic circles, stuff like that. Or the flexible posts. Those are, the more I look at example uses of those, the more I like them. But basically, you can put this stuff up and then see how it works, and either leave it up permanently or take it to another intersection if it doesn't work, or say, oh, we're going to put this in concrete, so we can take this stuff out, do the actual construction, and then use this somewhere else, which is actually it's actually 2 items from now, the Vision Zero next steps. I was going to talk about Safe Streets for All and the planning and demonstration grant that they have. And the demonstration part of it can be used for these kind of temporary traffic calming installations. You just have to, as we were talking about additional red tape, you have to actually do the analysis and see if they're actually working, and then take them out if they're not working. So,
for those who are not, is anybody not aware of the example of this process that was done at the intersection of Williamsburg and Whitney Ways? So it's maybe 10 years ago now that there were people not stopping at the stop sign in the eastern leg coming from the Verona Road. And they would not stop, they would whip around the corner from Williamsburg onto Whitney Way northbound. And it was a high crash situation. And the city of Fitchburg went out there and put flexi posts and removed parking for a half a lot, and narrowed the street with flexi posts so that there was room for 1 car between the center line, and tightened up the curb ratio, the corner radius, and left that out for a season, and police monitored the intersection, and this works great. People were complying with the stop sign more often, there were fewer crashes, and then they came back subsequently and put in the curb and planted grass and made a permanent installation. So we have a history of that. Safe Streets for All does recommend that it's a legitimate thing to do to buy flexi posts and rubber armadillos and other kinds of traffic, nail-in traffic furniture.
and undertake these kinds of things. So that suggests that we could put it in the 2025 budget to buy some stuff. You know, $10,000 would buy a lot of stuff that we could, that's the price of one concrete or maybe two concrete speed tables. You can buy rubber speed tables.
Those cost about as much as the real thing, unfortunately.
But then you can
But you can move them.
Yeah.
That's
So you got your question about tactical urbanism answered. We like it,
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
We
So
prefer it from a city.
Right, I mean, so-
Non-city
so it'd be awesome if people could you know, take matters into their own hands, so to speak, but obviously get a blessing from the city, because if they do it wrong, they might make it worse.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes roundabouts have to be reconstructed because the space isn't, right? I mean, isn't the
Oh, was
geometry
it
of
the old design? It
Yeah,
was
like
not
it-
the modern, it was not a modern roundabout.
it was not designed to be a roundabout.
right. One issue, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the issue you're getting at is in these areas of the city where we don't have sidewalks and crosswalks, if we put a traffic circle in the middle of the intersection, it pushes
The cars
vehicles
and the
out to where the
pedestrians.
pedestrians are walking. So there needs to be some sort of additional work done to correct that. And if you make the traffic circle small enough that it doesn't push the cars out, then people can just blow by
They
it,
blow
so.
by it.
Yeah, it's like a-
So we're talking Osmondson and Pembroke, no? Schumann would be
Right.
an example
Yeah.
of, you know, mature trees right up to the curb.
Mhm.
I have a comment that's kind of a slight shift in this topic, but if that's okay, if someone wants to talk about
Is it
it.
still close to
Yeah, it's about,
safety?
it's
Go
about
ahead.
Pembroke.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Pembroke, Bill and I are trying to organize a meeting with the neighbors to talk about that issue, because the crash, while it was not due to the design of the road necessarily, I'm not gonna say that completely,
The
but
design was an enabler.
yes, but the person, like ultimately the crash was because the person was not paying attention. But it brought up the issues where people aren't happy with the speed of the road, and they're nervous about it for good reason. There's no sidewalks, so people are walking in the street. So they had done a community action request, and didn't meet the criteria. But I guess it brings up the whole issue that there's no process for follow through with the neighborhood to explain to them what the results of it
How would you like
was.
to have a crash analysis studio?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's slightly different, right? It's like talking about like what the results were and why it doesn't work and what are the things that we're going to do and how we're gonna keep monitoring it. But it's just something, and I don't know, maybe this was part of the plan, but we never circled back with the Pembroke neighbors. So they feel like the city didn't do anything, and that's not true, but at the same time, we didn't necessarily communicate with them fully what had happened. And so it's just something that I think we need to think about with the traffic management process.
Well,
That's a fair point. I have communicated the results of the traffic study with the resident who submitted it, who's also named Ross. And my conversations there, he wasn't very happy with the news I was giving him, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Was
Which
there a
is fair.
speed study?
There was, yes.
Subsequently? So we actually have that step too. So,
We actually have data both on Pembroke from the original community action request and on Raritan after this crash.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's prime, we're gonna organize a meeting with the neighbors, and I appreciate it, we do circle back with the person that submitted it, but there were dozens of people that signed it
Mhm.
that never heard the results. And I don't know what that looks like, is it a matter of collecting the email addresses and make sure everyone gets an email that's like the official response? Or is it that we always organize a neighborhood meeting afterward just to clarify and give people an opportunity to learn more?
you two, the alders for that area?
Yes.
What would you think about the idea of an activist focused or generated crash analysis studio that did not involve city staff?
I mean,
Because we have the
this
speed
is-
study
Yeah,
and.
I think I think that would be a great idea. I mean, basically do a bunch of work, which would then be communicated to the city, but not take up any of the city's time until we're finished with, you know, the studio.
The only issue I have with it, and I don't have any issue with people talking about city issues and bringing ideas, but the only issue I have with it is that I don't want it to give people the false impression that something's gonna change. If the analysis has been done by the city and the city has determined that no mitigations are gonna happen beyond maybe a permanent speed feedback board.
Or is a stop sign on Pembroke at that intersection at play or no?
I can go through that. I have a
Okay.
pretty detailed warrant breakdown that I
Yeah,
can.
I mean, I think we should-
share if you want.
We should talk about it at the neighborhood meeting, I think, right?
Right.
Ultimately, like, I just think that if you do something like that, and if the city has already made a determination and there's not gonna be action, I think it gives people a false sense that they're.
Oh, yeah.
And then it leads to disappointment without any, like, in this particular instance for this particular intersection, it's a special case because there's already been an analysis and a determination by the city. So,
How close were they? Like, were they even close to being near the threshold?
For the TMP, for moving forward in the
Yeah.
TMP, so the minimum vehicles per day to move forward in the TMP is 500, and both Raritan has about 290 vehicles per day, and Pembroke has about 330.
So not close.
So yeah, a little bit more than half.
And crashes per average daily traffic count means nothing. I mean, there were 2 incidents at this same intersection over the span of 7 years, and if there were thousands of cars going through there every day, then
It would
that's
be
a pretty low ratio, but there's only a small number of hundreds going through every day. It seems like a high ratio of crashes per vehicle, you know?
That's a fair point, and it's not represented in the traffic management process
Right.
until you get to the score sheet, which is ranking projects against each other. So it's not a factor for including a project in the TMP in the first place.
Well, I want to point out a couple of things. One of them is that you'll remember that, so that there's a stop sign violation here. And one thing in the proven safety mitigation things that we went through is the idea of putting these reflective bars in front of the sign, on the front of the signpost to make the signs more visible. And that would be in that medium-term thing, you know, next year's budget, we'll buy some of those for that intersection. So that would be an example. I wanted to point out in the short term, which could be tactical urbanism if activists do it, but it could be a temporary installation if the Public Works does it, but it's the same thing. The people that wrote the book on tactical urbanism, Mike Lydon and Tony Garcia, are actually consultants for our city. They brought the bicycle module here to Fitchburg in 2010 for the Smart Code. So they know about Fitchburg. They've biked around here. So I think that we could proceed on the tactical urbanism front to get some equipment for Public Works. I think that I would like to talk to you two about having a studio. And the idea, if it's not elected official or staff initiated, is that you have this report that you can take to the city government and says, well, here are some of the recommendations from our technical and neighborhood experts and the causes that they think that these would help mitigate. And so this would be input to Public Works for future improvements in the traffic management process, future capital projects, and so on. I'm thinking, for example, neck downs, where we have our super wide streets, and the neck downs would have sidewalks on them, so that it would be a safe place to stand before crossing. It would mitigate the issue of traffic circle pushing cars into pedestrians. And, you know, flexi-post neck downs would be an easy thing, and you could go out and measure the new speeds. The neck downs on Monroe, on Tacoma Road near Thoreau School that I've already talked about seem very effective in getting people to comply with the new speed limit of 25 through there. So what do you want to do about this next? Do we three want to meet, or should I meet with Ross to offline to think of what we're going to do next, or how do you, what do people think is warranted here?
Well, I think I like the idea of the crash analysis studio and having involving the neighbors. What I would like to know from Ross is, if the neighbors want to do something, what are they allowed to do? If the city doesn't do anything, what are the neighbors allowed to do?
Probably not paint on the street and put up signs.
Yeah, I mean, they're not allowed to make any changes to, permanent changes in the right of way, let alone to the actual street itself.
That's why it's called tactical.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying though. I mean, how does the city feel about tactical urbanism? So if they do something, is the city gonna come in and take it out immediately?
Or prosecute.
Right, yeah. And, if so, would they be allowed to stick retroreflective stickers on the front of the stop signs, for instance? I don't know. Is there anything they're allowed to do?
I mean, that's an easy enough thing that the city could also buy a roll of red retroreflective tape and do that there if that's something that comes out of the crash studio or something like that,
Well, so I don't want to have the crash analysis studio if, like Gabriella said, absolutely nothing will be allowed to fall out of that.
Nothing that the citizens will. The city is not going to authorize the citizens to do anything.
Right.
So you could have citizens doing unauthorized things, or you could influence the city to do something, which I think is the real effort, the real cause.
I'm just gonna reiterate that I think this is a bad example for it, just because of the longtime concerns with this neighborhood, the fact that it's already been through a traffic management, community action response. And we're gonna meet with the neighbors, so there is we're gonna try to take some action and hopefully get some feedback, and maybe there are things that we can do aside from maybe a permanent speed feedback board, which we can talk about, like small things that we can do. I just don't wanna go through a process that gives people the wrong impression. Because I think the worst thing that you can do is ask for people for feedback and not be honest with them about what the action is going to be taken. So it's much better to tell someone, no, this can't happen, than to just pretend we're going to listen to what they have to say. The most frustrating thing is listening to somebody and pretending that you're going to do something and then not doing something. You have to be honest with people and.
Yeah. Well, but I do like the idea of, at least trying to influence the city. I mean, okay, hypothetical. Let's say that intersection was the site of a crash every other month. You don't get to that part of the TMP unless there's at least 500 cars in each direction. Well,
So that was my concern about saying, we can't make any improvements here unless it matches the TMP. Unless it's through the TMP process.
right. So do we want to consider possible further changes to the TMP?
So the other option here would be, say a crash happened every other month, like you said. Then the city would likely have another project either put forward by staff or by elected officials to reconstruct that intersection or, whatever fix that we came up with. It would be a separate project outside of the TMP.
Okay, so the TMP is reserved for citizen initiation mostly.
Correct, yes. I mean, almost completely. I think staff could technically.
I think there were provisions in there that said staff or a couple of alders could initiate it as well. But, okay, so, it's not like we it's not like we're not allowed to do anything because the TMP metrics don't say it's allowed.
Yeah, the TMP does not govern all the other various city processes for
It
doing
goes back
stuff.
to that, when we changed the speed limit, I believe it was on East Sherrill Parkway, and I had a suggestion to lower some speed limits on Research Park Drive, and it was going through Public Works, and there was going to be a before and after speed study and temporary signs and things like that. And then Jay Allen introduces an ordinance and it gets passed and boom, it's done. I say, well, that is an incentive for me to go talk to alders instead of engineers when I want these kind of changes made. So, I can imagine from the perspective of the transportation engineer and the public works director that you would much rather use data and prioritize and do the things in the order that you want to do them. But you have to have some defense, I think, other than, well, it doesn't meet the warrants for the TMP and we have higher priority intersections. I mean, we need to be able to, hey, there's Mike. Hey, Mike.
Hi, everybody. I'm really sorry. We had 6:30 on our calendars. That was a problem on our end, so I apologize.
No problem. We had a good discussion and we recommended approval.
So what you're saying is I could have only made things worse if I was there.
You would have had to explain the difference between the presentation that we all saw and the report that none of us read, or at least I didn't read. And Ross, and that fell to Ross, and he said that it was pretty faithfully presented in the presentation. So we passed it.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. I'm
So
sorry.
if you don't want to hang out, we're done with you. But I appreciate your effort.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No problem. Have a good evening. All right. Well, we're running out of time, and fortunately, we only have a couple things to talk about. But I think this might be enough on this, and maybe I can talk to the alders for the district, and we can come up with an idea that doesn't involve a lot of staff time and doesn't make staff's lives significantly worse, and that can provide some kind of answers to the neighbors. Because I know that, as a former alder, I know that's a huge problem to have all those things hanging out, and I also know it's a huge problem to set an expectation that you can't meet. So, does that sound like enough on that for everybody? Any parting shots? Okay, the next one has to do with the Wilshire parking situation. This started as employees are parking on the street for the courtyard, and the neighbors are complaining that they're having trouble maneuvering and that it's an unsafe situation. And I thought that it might involve more than that. I guess I probably incorrectly tried to extend it to the pedestrian crossing problems just to the northeast on Chapel Valley. So let's stick with parking on Wilshire. In general, I like street parking because it calms traffic. What's the latest from the neighbors, Gabriella?
I don't know, I think Bill actually has more.
Oh, Bill?
information.
Well, yeah, so there was an email string, and actually go back to the satellite view. So when I initially read this, the part that stuck out in my mind was people having trouble backing out onto Wilshire and people having trouble making their way out of Bentley onto Wilshire.
And there's another one, right? Rembrandt?
Yeah, Rembrandt is up to the north and east there a little bit.
Right there.
But the email string talked about Bentley and then people backing out of the condos onto Wilshire. So I had made the assumption that people were parking on the west/north side of Wilshire.
Mm-hmm,
That is not the case.
mm-hmm.
They're on the east/south side. So, yeah, so I guess I'm having trouble understanding why somebody would need to back all the way through the other lane of travel and utilize the parking lane, or why, I was thinking sightlines were the issue. People were parking right up to the street, up to the driveway, and so you would have to pull all the way out in order to, put yourself in danger just to see whether you were in danger.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm still a little fuzzy as to what the actual issue is.
Anything to add, Gabrielle?
No.
Yeah.
We're gonna meet with the courtyard.
Yeah, but
And
that's
see if
about
there's a-
employee parking.
Yes.
And right now, I don't know what the population is of the memory care, but assisted living is pretty empty as they
Right.
start to fill
And
up.
you've got what, like 70 units or something?
I don't know the number. But when they start to fill up, there's gonna be visitors, and they're gonna park on the street as well as in the parking. And so I don't think that simply saying all employees must park in their own parking, and that doesn't, can you scroll up a little bit, or
North?
scroll south?
There's nothing.
Yeah, there's no other parking there. So these kinds of institutions take a lot of parking because there's a lot of people in there taking care of these people, the residents. What's the parking situation? Oh, we can't see on this building. Probably about the same amount of parking up there, right?
A little more. It's a longer building.
Yeah, but
That gives.
the longer building has more units,
Yeah.
so,
Right, but and I don't know if any of the people who are going to live there are gonna have a car.
no.
None, okay.
But there's probably 2 people employed there. I mean, have you ever seen the employee parking at the new rehab hospital? It's just full of people.
Yeah.
There's a huge number of people that park at hospice care and none of their residents have cars. Visitors and employees, because it's labor intensive is healthcare. So I don't know that employees parking in their own parking is gonna solve the problems, and that's why I was wondering if we should deal with it. One thing we could do is and I asked Ross to maybe be able to comment on where we are signing short-term parking where there's a 2-hour limit. So right now, where did I see that? In Terravesa, in front of the commercial lots, there's 2-hour parking, and there should be by Oasis Cafe, because that's all short-term parking. There really is, you never see people park there all day. People are very respectful, and they park in the back if they work there or whatever. But that's another example, and Hatchery Hill would be another example where you've got retail frontage and you would like to have short-term parking, and I'm wondering if labeling the street to be 2-hour parking there would help, because then visitors could park there, but they wouldn't be there all the time.
And the employees have to park in the lot.
Well, if they're gonna park for a shift, yeah. Or they'd have to park farther up or down the street.
Or they're gonna park on Bentley and the neighbors are gonna get more mad because they're.
I think we need to have a conversation with the courtyard,
And
potentially with the
we've
neighbors
got that
before we can, I
scheduled for next
don't think
week.
we're in a position to solve this problem
Yeah.
right now.
Well, yeah, at the time I suggested we discuss this, like I said, I was assuming it was a problem with the sight lines because people were parking right up to the driveways and right up to Bentley and
But they're not parking on the northwest at all.
no.
I get it, I drive this road all the time because that's how I go to the park and to my vet, and with the curve of the road, there's cars on it, like, it's hard to see, and it's like when you got cars coming both ways, but it, like you said, it kind of just acts more as traffic calming than anything else, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, if I can just kind of throw my,
Yeah, let's have a staff report.
I would want to listen to an expert, I don't understand.
I don't know if the short-term parking restrictions would address this issue with people having issues backing out of driveways. So if there's a car there and it's there for 2 hours, you still have the issue. I think the short-term parking restriction is really to help the turnover at businesses. So you don't have cars clogging up there, parking all day, especially in the more urbanized areas like Hatchery Hill, Terravessa, where there's not always an actual parking lot. And these streets were designed for on-street parking.
On
If
both sides.
we start restricting parking, this is an issue that we've had in Terravessa, then we start turning over the parking complaints and the roads too narrow into speeding complaints. So.
Yeah. All right, well, let us leave it to our two alders from the area to come back if we need more discussion on this.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay, I said to Ross and Dino when I put up the proposed agenda that if Vision Zero next steps were if we were to run too long, we could move that to next time. The main question is whether we want to go back to the committee of the whole or whether we want to have the mayor submit the Vision Zero resolution at this point, or are there more steps that we need to take? And I would be delighted to hear a staff report.
So I actually have another piece to share with this commission. The MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, is putting together a Safe Streets for All planning and demonstration application that's joint between the MPO, which is this department of the city of Madison, and they need basically 2 other communities that are in the MPO. I put forward Fitchburg's interest in this, in being a partner on this grant, as basically our part would be to get a Vision Zero action plan. To do that, the Vision Zero action plan obviously costs money, $200,000 to $300,000. This would be an 80-20 match for the grant, so Fitchburg would be responsible for about $60,000, if that's at the $300,000 range.
In what budget year?
This would be budget year
25.
2025, I believe. It's possible it could be pushed to 2026. We'd basically be putting out RFPs for the action plan in Q3 or Q4 of 2025. So depending on when we ask for those back, that could determine the budget year.
Has the mayor weighed in on the idea of Fitchburg being involved?
The mayor has not. The feedback I've gotten from the city administrator is that $60,000 is still a chunk of money, and we would need council support for that,
Oh, yeah.
obviously.
But first step in getting council support is getting the mayor support. Well, do you want the sense of this commission, or?
I think that would be very helpful.
Okay.
So if we wanted to put together a resolution, that might be, or like whatever, like a draft of the resolution, and then you could come to committee of the whole and share it. There are 2 new alders. And the Vision Zero presentation before was very much theoretical. If we had something more,
Yeah, it
maybe
was
something
more
more
of a heads
concrete of what they would be looking at, kind of like pre-education before before it was referred out, might be just one idea.
And the Vision Zero resolution, which sets your goal of 0 and your timeline, could also give council support for the administration to proceed with the action plan.
And we also don't need the actual Vision Zero resolution to move forward with this grant process either. That can be kind of part of the
It does come before the action plan, but it doesn't need to come before the grant submission.
Correct.
Okay. All right, well then let's finish this up and reset it for the next agenda. Would there someone be interested in making a motion that the sense of the committee is that, the commission is that we move ahead with this and that we'll plan our next steps at our next meeting? That way Ross will know that we are supporting of it or not, whichever we are.
So moved.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I move, we move.
So that was, commission supports the concept of the city applying for the Vision Zero Action Plan grant in conjunction with the MPO.
Second.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Second by Bill. Any further discussion? Seeing no discussion and the time is late, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let the record show that the motion was unanimous, or the vote was unanimous. We will be back at a regular time on June 13th. For future agenda items, I think we put a couple down.
Yeah,
What do you
adding
have so far?
adding a plan commission report and a bike and pedestrian commission report to future agendas.
Okay, so we will talk about that next time. And we'll talk about Vision Zero. And if the alders and I make any progress on a crash analysis studio or some related thing, we'll be in touch to get that on the agenda. Anything else that we should put on for future items?
I think we were gonna talk about 65 or whatever. You guys cut
Oh,
off
yes,
that
yes.
conversation and said we should do that because it wasn't.
Should we start
65, 75.
start discussion on extending transit service to City Hall?
Yeah, that can be an agenda item next time. I can have
Okay.
a staff report.
I'd also, as part of that, I'd be interested to see if there's a possibility of extending the current Route B down to Brendan Trevorton Bike.
Oh, yeah,
Have it mirror what the
let's
West Rapid
attach-
Transit
yep,
is gonna do.
And we have to elect a vice chair.
oh,
Yes.
yeah, we'll do that too. You got all those? Dina will get them from the tape if you miss one.
Yep.
All right, so any other announcements besides our next meeting time of June 13th?
If you know any experts in transit and transportation issues, encourage them to apply, because we do have a vacancy.
Okay, motion? To adjourn?
Move to it. Yeah, second.
Okay, thank you, Bill and Micah. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.